Hello, everyone. We are now live. Hi, Toby. Good morning.
Hey, Daren. Happy Tuesday.
It is Tuesday. Yes. Same to you. How are you doing?
Great. Excited to be here. Always happy to chat with you with a few of our friends.
Me too. I'm in a very good mood today. It's going to be a great session.
Absolutely.
We're going to wait for a handful of everybody to join. It's just now at the top of the hour. So we're going to have a few people. Got quite a few people trickling in here. So give it another minute or so, then we'll kick things off. We like to be prompt here at Speak Up.
Absolutely. Got the chat going here as well. I think we have a reminder to ask us questions. We love that.
Very good. Yes. And if you're trickling in, throw a comment in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from and maybe a little something about what you do.
That was very call-in show. I like that, like very radio call-in show. Where are you calling from?
That's right, yeah. You call it number 99 to win those concert tickets.
Exactly.
All right. We got London. We've got the Netherlands. We've got Smyrna, Tennessee. We've got the great state of New Jersey. Spain. This is an international audience today.
Oh, yeah. And we've got
San Francisco. Brianna, great to have you. Chris Palermo, nice to see you again, Chris. Hope you're doing well.
Ooh, by way of Long Island. Love that.
Well, it's 1 minute after the hour. We got a few more people trickling. Why don't we say we get started with some housekeeping and some intros, and we'll kick this, get this show on the road. What do you say, Toby?
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, Amy. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. It is Employee Experience in 2025, the Trends, Tools, and Tactics, presented by Speak Up. My name is Daren Jennings. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Speak Up. So I look after our marketing, our sales, our customer success function. And really, my whole passion in life is just to help organizations around the world improve their employee experience, because employment is such a big part of our personal lives that I do believe that if you improve people's lives at work, you improve their lives, period. So happy to be here today. Toby, say hello to the group.
Hello, everyone. Head of Customer Experience, what does that mean? I get to partner really closely with our customers to launch an employee app. And ultimately, the fun stuff is then figuring out what are you going to do for your business using that app? And then what are the strategies, tools, tactics? Ties into our topic today. How do you make this thing work? How do you bite off the first set of goals? How do you learn from what others have done and experienced in the past? So it's a ton of fun, and it gives us a chance to share some of this advice with you. I also have a background in communications, and in fact, today I'm serving as the president of IABC Colorado. That is the International Association of Business Communicators. If you haven't ever checked that out, I highly recommend. So this topic's near and dear to me, so excited to jump in today.
Awesome. Thank you, Toby. And don't sell yourself short. You've forgotten more about this business than I'll ever learn. So really happy to have you today. And hey, Brianna. Hey, Diana. Hey, Amy. Thank you. We got San Diego and Puerto Rico. Keep dropping those comments in. Let's keep this chat going. Before we jump in, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's session. So I know you're all taking feverish notes, but this will be sent out to everybody after the call today. But feel free to jot any questions you might have down. Throw them in the chat. Speaking of questions, we want to keep this engaging and all day long, or at least for the course of this webinar. So I'm going to be dropping in a couple polls and questions throughout. So please respond. And if you have anything you want us to address, throw them in the chat. If you have questions for us, we're going to have some time at the end of the session. If you don't have questions, that's okay, but we'll wrap it up. So now that the housekeeping's out of the way, let's cover off the agenda for today's game plan. And you can see, massive spoiler alert, it is indeed all about employee experience. So the first thing we're going to focus on is why employee experience is indeed the defining focus for 2025. Finally, we're going to talk about that, why we think we're turning the corner there. Then we're going to focus really on those three trends that are shaping EX this year and why they're a little bit different than we might have seen in the past. We're going to pivot a little bit then to talk about where you might be in the frontline employee experience maturity model. And that's just a really good diagnosis tool that we've developed, and I think it'll give some context. Then we're going to jump into those really, really specific tactical tailored actions that no matter where you are within that maturity model, these are some elements that you can employ today with zero cost, maybe a bit of effort, but you can employ today to start to move the needle on that. And again, Q&A at the end if we have time for it. But let's jump in. So we've got a first question for you, and you're going to see a pop-up on your screen, but I'm curious from the audience, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing today when it comes to employee experience? So you should have a little modal on your screen there. So is it engaging employees across multiple locations, creating that unified comm strategy, addressing burnout and high turnover, or implementing the right tools and technologies? So go ahead and submit your votes, and we'll see how those go. Got some responses kind of pulling in here. All right, looks like burnout and turnover is leading so far. Lots of issues with engaging employees across multiple locations, unified comms, and implementing the right tools and technologies. And it looks like they're changing. We're almost at full vote, so it looks like, yeah, we got a tie. Oh, we got a tie here now, Toby.
I would have guessed turnover at the top because we know how often we hear about it. But yeah, look at that. Love it.
Yeah, tied for first. So engaging employees across multiple locations. I mean, you could certainly assume that that's part of the addressing the high burnout and the turnover. So yeah, great responses, everybody. So let's keep going. So the first one I really want to talk about is this is really just why employee experience is the defining focus for 2025, and we want to talk a little bit of detail about this. But before we do, let's move on to some quick statistics, and this is kind of a wake-up call for everybody. Now you can see that, according to UKG, 75% of frontline employees across all generations are experiencing burnout. And as we can see, that's supported from the poll results that we've just had. Now, one thing that really intrigues me about this is across all generations. And over the course of my experience within this industry, Toby, this has been really changed. And, there's a lot of, it was the dreaded millennials at first, and now it's Gen Z, and they tended to be less engaged compared to older folks and had different priorities. But this is something that is happening across all generations of the workforce today. And it's a major issue. And one thing that's always baffled me over the years is, we as an industry, companies have invested billions and billions with a B in terms of moving the needle on employee engagement, on investing more in training and onboarding processes, certainly paying people more, and that we haven't moved the needle at all, really, when it comes to employee engagement, at least at scale. A lot of organizations are doing it. But what do you think, Toby? Anything to add here?
It's done in pockets, right? Like that's the thing. I hate talking about the general statistics. I feel like it's quite demotivating to those of us who keep working on employee engagement. It's not to say to stop, right? It's just to say we really do need to keep working on it, and we're trying to move the needle. Frontline teams can be different, and it's not the same as a desk-facing workforce. So I think this is helpful to dive into that from that perspective. So leads us to our next question. Interested to see here. I did see we had some consultants. So granted, if other applies, just interested to hear what industry you're working in.
Kind of all over the place. So we got some representation from manufacturing, hospitality, logistics. A lot of you in the other. If you're in the other category, feel free to throw in the chat what you might do. We'll try to weave some examples in that might be relevant for your industry. This is great, though. And, regardless of if you're in one of these industries or not, frontline workers and desk-based workers, while they do have some differences and nuances between them, we think that there's going to be a lot of value for you here throughout the webinar. So if we take a moment for this wake-up call, think about turnover. I mean, this is a significant challenge that a lot of organizations face, is they simply don't have enough workers, and they're losing the ones that they have. So if you look at this, for those of you who are in manufacturing, this probably doesn't come as a surprise. 37% turnover per year in manufacturing. More than half of construction workers turnover every single year, which is really scary for folks in that industry. I was at an event just before the end of last year, and they said that there is, in 2025, an expected 650,000 employee shortage in the construction industry alone. So retention for those folks is definitely top of mind from what I understand. Anyway, 31% in logistics, 60% in retail, and an eye-watering 74% of people who work in hospitality. So if you're running a hotel, you hire 4 people, 3 of them are going to leave before the end of the year. This is a constant challenge for you.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to the 12 or 15% of people across, all industries, frontline workers or organizations with a high percentage of them, they really struggle with this.
Yeah, and I think again, this can feel a little daunting, but there are ways to attack this. We do run into customers that have high tenure with certain groups, and I think you look at construction. The issue that you're facing might not be the same as the issue in retail, as far as the thing that gets them to leave. Maybe construction, it's more that not about pay. It's more that there are 5 different companies wanting to hire me, right? Versus maybe in hospitality, it's really the difference of 25 to 50 cents an hour. Like there could be a lot of different causes here, but there are things to do. So
Absolutely. And I saw a comment in the chat that David he's working at a nonprofit charity working with mental health and training. Not one of the represented industries here, but you talk about a grueling, tough job. I can imagine that turnover is tough there. So hopefully we can address some of those topics for you, David.
I love that. And we do actually have customers working in nonprofits, but also, healthcare type areas. There's a lot of use cases there where you've got folks in the field, they're on their feet all day. They may have tech, but it's more specific to the job. So, we do see a lot of other, not just these industries, anybody who's got a majority of people that are in frontline, I think are impacted here. Okay, so little transition. So we've covered the sort of the challenges, right? We know that turnover is an issue. We know that at the industry level, there's different impacts. But why are Daren and I here to talk to you about employee experience? Because indeed, you might be focused on communications. You might be focused on HR in particular. And what I want to share is a few drivers of this change that we've seen. Because whether it's HR or whether it's comms, it is no longer going to meet the bar of effectiveness to just work in silos. You have to figure out how to work across the business. And so the practice or thought of employee experience is here to help. So why I think information overload is for real when it comes to our employees. They have so much being thrown at them. And if you think of a frontline worker in particular, A, it's hard to get to them, but then B, when you do, if you give them a noisy environment, they're not going to get the messages. They'll miss things. So, you're putting investment into programming and benefits, and they're not getting them. So if they don't know about it, they can't take advantage. So that's one driver for why we should focus on employee experience. Another one is, we all know that there is not one tool out there. There is not one employee experience software I can buy and be done. So everybody has to have an HR system. And I will tell you, in the last year, we've seen the continuation of HR tools trying to be everything to a company and trying to be the one thing. But the reality is, and we see it and we hear it from our customers, is that they do some things really well, right? They store that employee demographic data. I can change my address. I can get my pay. I can get my schedule, perhaps. That's become a newer use case as well. But communications and employee experience and employee voice, not so much. So, this is another reason why comms and frontline teams and HR teams need to look at that full employee experience. And here's the one I keep seeing. If you're on LinkedIn and you're a communicator or you're in HR, stop giving me the sole responsibility of employee engagement. But it keeps happening. Employee engagement and culture, right? That's for comms and HR. Well, guess what? We can make a difference, yes, but it has to be by integrating with the business and looking at the whole employee experience. And ultimately, when we do that, we can for example, work to democratize communications so that people can communicate properly throughout the organization, but still in a safe way, low risk, sharing messages the way that they need to. We also can enable transparent communication. So I know today still, especially with executive comms, you've got, we're writing messages for our leaders, but when you can find a leader willing to speak their own voice and to jump in, it makes the difference. It makes the ability to feel trust and transparency and authenticity, even in tough times. And those are all things that lead to, if you look at, focusing on the employee experience, it will pay benefits for you.
I love that, Tobi, and I completely agree. It's employee experience should no longer be the remit of a handful of people. It has to be everyone's responsibility all the time and all pulling in the same direction, because it does have an impact on actual business results when it's done properly, as we're going to talk about. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically what we see from the data, this one's from McKinsey, and this, I think we're going to see a lot more data in the next year too, is that when you have a report that there's a positive employee experience, the output is more engaged employees. And even though we have struggled to move the needle on employee engagement, we have learned that engaged users, sorry, not users, employees, people who are engaged at work, they are indeed more productive. They're more efficient. They are happier, which is nice. Not always. You don't always have to be happy to be engaged, but a lot of times they are. So there are specific outcomes that we can see for investing in this type of work. So with that said, transitioning to our next sort of topic here, what are the 3 trends that we see shaping employee experience in 2025? And I'm going to admit that, like, I know you've probably been seeing these trends, posts and comments and webinars for a couple months now. So we really thought about, what's everybody saying? And then, Daren and I have looked at what are we seeing with our industries and what are we seeing, especially when it comes to these frontline teams. And so that's what we're going to focus on for you today. Look, the way I'm putting this is it's time for comms and HR to shine. So we have been talking for a long time about things like getting a seat at the table, making sure we can be there. We're sitting here telling you to work cross-functionally, but how do you make that happen? And at the end of the day, this is the year to just move into it and start making sure that you're speaking the language of the business, that the work you do is tied to business outcomes that everybody else can understand. So not just talking about, my engagement numbers or my activity metrics but really, we are measuring impact to retention within our business and then taking the steps to be doing it. So stating what work you do and how you're going to track whether you're impacting, those outcomes. And that's the place we need to move into. And it's at this point where you're just going to be at the table. And I think that's the thing that, is going to be a big move for this year. What do you think, Daren?
100%. I mean, we've been talking for a long time about framing internal communications, employee experience, employee engagement in the terms of business outcomes, and having goals like clarity and alignment. These are wonderful, but they should be in pursuit of something that is a tangible business outcome. And whether you're a charity and you need to serve your community better, or whether you are manufacturing that needs to increase its output, no matter what it is, these actually do have an impact on that. And putting my economic hat on for a minute, as a commercial leader within the business, we have conversations with folks within this industry all the time who want to do something. They see the light, but they're unable to move it forward because there might be budgetary constraints and people are sitting on the sidelines. So we see that there's a lot of pent up demand out there that people in 2025 are saying we're ready to push go and accelerate. So for those of you that have been kind of sitting on the sidelines or white knuckling your way through this, you've had limited support, limited tools and resources. Like, this is your chance. I think 2025 is going to be your year. But as Tobi said it best, don't wait for your seat at the table. Take it.
Absolutely. All right, number 2, you're not shocked, I'm sure, to see AI here on the screen. Our take is this: it's time to move from exploration, experimentation into implementation. So I've still seen some communicators say even like, I won't touch it. Well, guess what? You actually probably are. It is baked into so many things that we do, so many tools we use, and it has been actually for a long time. We're just at an acceleration point that's pretty incredible. And so at this time, you have to be looking at, for your own teams and within your business, what AI tools can you use to work more effectively, be more productive, and really help, because again, those limited resources are never going to stop. So how can we take advantage of these tools? I have a caveat though. With that said, we have to pay attention to what's happening in this space. So your organization needs your help. They need guidelines. They need direction about what it is and is not okay when it comes to using AI for work. They need to understand, that your intellectual property can't just be popped into some public AI tool because you're giving it away. So that's one, clear and key example. Another one is that this is going to keep changing. What is available? What are the tools? There's a lot going on In the legal space, there's a lot going on. If anybody heard of DeepSeek yesterday, if you haven't checked it, check it out, because there's a lot going on that is going to impact the direction of these tools and functionalities. So you need to be able to kind of guide with your company principles and practices and let people know what's okay and what's not. But you can't just be on the sidelines anymore. You have to jump in and figure out how to keep moving this forward.
Totally agree. I imagine a lot of people that are attending or tuning in right now have already embraced AI, and even some folks that are going to be watching the recording later. If you haven't, give it a shot. It is really unbelievably revolutionary. I heard somebody put it in terms that, the Industrial Revolution massively increased a human being's ability to be stronger through the use of machinery and tools and so forth. So it made the work of one person 10 times what it was possible for. AI is the same thing, but it's making everybody smarter. It can make you smarter. It can make you more efficient. The things that you really struggle with, it can summarize in such an easy way. So it can literally be a little companion for you to make your jobs easier. And it's going to propel your business your business forward. So utilize it as you need to. If you can do it at scale and consistently across the business, now is the time. So it's a huge part of the conversation.
Yeah, I love that comparison. The other one that I think of is what your life look like before a smartphone and after a smartphone. And that's where I feel like this is, again, when we look back, we're going to see this moment and have that same type of comparison. So
yep.
Time to jump in there. And you probably already are, but just pay attention. So speaking of things changing, we're still navigating rough seas. I really feel like this did indeed become very clear in the pandemic. It's been 5 years. It's not stopping, right? So we are going to continue to face turbulent times. We're going to have new things come up, whether it is a new weather event, whether it is a situation at work, whether it is something happening from a security, whether that's cyber or physical. These things are going to continue to happen. There are political and macroeconomic things going on. So the point here is that this is the year to make sure and bolster up what's the plan. The thing that happens, it's always a bit of a surprise, but there should be zero surprise about how your organization is going to handle it when it happens. You have to have really clear plans in place. Where are you communicating, to whom, who's communicating, how does it happen? What do we value as an organization? What are we holding up as our key principles so that we can follow that? So now is the time for making sure there's zero surprise on how you're handling these rough seas. You got to have a little. You're the compass. You're going to be the compass for the org, basically.
So true, and it's no surprise that all three of these trends that we're seeing in 2025, they're related, right? We know things are going to come up. How we handle them is up to us, and having those plans in place. AI can help you with those types of elements. This is your opportunity as communications and HR leaders and employee experience practitioners to use the AI and navigating those rough seas to capture that seat at the table and really turn the corner to driving those business outcomes. So I see this as a unification of a lot of these themes that we've seen over the years as we push ahead in 2025 and beyond. Well, I guess it's my turn now, isn't it, Toby? So we're going to shift gears for a minute. Okay, so Toby's talked a little bit about kind of what the future holds. What we're expecting to happen this year and beyond. Let's take a look back for a second now and think about how things are today and where you might sit within this framework, because we really want to understand how it is that how we can actually implement some of these tools and tactics into something that is going to be really useful for me. And it really helps to diagnose where you are today. And that's where we develop this frontline employee experience maturity model. So now we can go to the next one. Thank you. Okay. So for those of you who are in this stage, this is kind of the early stage. You're in the wilderness, aren't you? A lot of companies are in this stage one of just starting out. You're figuring out the basics. Day-to-day stuff takes most of the focus. And many of you who are here, a lot of them tend to have a lot of disconnected frontline workers. I mean, it's just part of the thing. They've been kind of left out of the conversation for a long time. So if you're in this stage, maybe you're doing some research, maybe you already have some insights in terms of what's lacking or where you can improve as an organization. Perhaps you're suffering from some of those consequences of poor employee experience. You might be dealing with high turnover, as we've talked about today. But it could be other elements like low employee engagement scores, higher absenteeism, lack of trust in leadership. That's a big one that we see when you're kind of in this stage. Or you're out of compliance with some new regulation, or you fear that you might be out of compliance. So, these things can impact all kinds of stuff. Customer experience. If you're a customer-facing organization in retail or hospitality, you start to see those customer experience scores go down. You're not meeting your growth goals. So you're starting to see and recognize some of these negative impacts of having a poor employee experience apparatus. But for a lot of times, you're really stuck in that day-to-day minutia. You're putting out the fires. You might be struggling with outdated systems. You're trying to trickle down communications and campaigns via managers. You're following up with them, making sure they're adhering to these things. For those of you who are also just starting up, maybe want to implement something, but you might be clashing with some other stakeholders within the business. I mean, we see this a lot. You might be dealing with legal or InfoSec or compliance who are trying to think about how do we balance the risk of implementing a whole new approach to employee experience with tools, for example, or with other campaigns. How do we balance that risk with the cost of doing nothing? And that's a really big challenge that a lot of companies face in this stage. And they're asking questions that we hear all the time. Well, what if somebody says something bad? What if we empower our local leaders to say something and it hasn't been vetted by legal? These are conversations that need to have, but something is wrong. You've got an itch you can't quite scratch. Tob, what do you think? Do you hear this a lot in some of the folks that you speak with?
Absolutely. And, I just want to say this experience maturity model, you're getting a nice sneak peek here. It's something we've been working on developing. And so there's no 100%, right? Like Daren just gave you a whole bunch of examples of where you might be right now, but for sure, just yesterday, I was speaking with a customer who has a lot of technical tools in place, but we're still having the legal risk conversations. So it's these are just examples, and I think our point is to help you sort of assess where you may be at this point. So very good.
Perfect. All right. So as we think about stage 2, if you've gotten out of the wilderness a little bit, you're making some progress. So for those of you who might be in the stage, you've got some level of buy-in typically from your leaders. The compliance teams are satisfied. They're saying, okay, we've got a plan in place to mitigate risk, or we're okay with a certain degree of it. And you're starting to implement some tools and programs here, right? So you're making some progress here. You're communicating regularly. You're maintaining those consistent themes about how your employee experience impacts those business challenges and those outcomes that you're looking for. You might start to have some anecdotal evidence that it's starting to work. So these are the qualitative feedback, right? Where we hear things like, well, people are commenting and they're stopping you in the hallways. Maybe you're starting to see some of those metrics improve around what we talked about with revenue increases or reduction in safety incidents or reduction in turnover. We're starting to see more people advance through the organization and take advantage of some of the resources they may not have known about. The challenge at this stage for a lot of organizations, though, is things tend to still be a little bit fragmented. So you might have different tools in different groups. Tobi, I see your head nodding, so I imagine this is resonating. So you've got different tools for different groups. You might have that rogue department that's saying, no way, we're not doing this, or we're going to do our own thing. They've got their own system in place. Then you might still be facing some of that resistance to change. And maybe it's not from your leaders. Maybe it's from the folks who have been used to a status quo for a long time that you're trying to convince and bring them into your tent. And maybe things aren't happening as consistently as you like, but you are making significant progress. You started to have those campaigns, but you maybe just need to kind of tighten things up a little bit. What do you think about that, Tobi?
Yeah, and maybe you have somebody coming to you going, hey, I like what you're doing here. How do I get involved, right? Like, I think this is that point, and my advice here is like, look for those people. Maybe don't focus so much on the naysayers and focus on the people where there's a little energy. They see that spark. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if we think about, if you've been kind of getting the hang of it, now you're entering into stage 3, and this is when you're really hitting your stride, and this is where things really start to come together. And for a lot of folks on this call, or if you may be thinking about yourself, this is a dream state for a lot of the folks that we speak with. They haven't even considered the next stage yet. This is when things are really starting to hum. Your systems and your people, your processes, they're all aligned towards that shared goal of unifying employee experience with company strategy, with mitigating some of those negative business outcomes. And this is what we talked about at the top of the hour, where this is not just a HR communications initiative. This is a company-wide initiative. So things really are humming. The most important element that we see at this stage is you're actually seeing impact, quantifiable impact. When we do X, Y happens. I know that's really tricky for a lot of people because there might be a lot of steps in between. And I talk a lot about this, but you're actually being able to say, well, when we did this program, we can see these results, and you're starting to see those big impacts. One of the best things that we start to see about this ties into what you mentioned a second ago, Tobi, is leaders and other people in the business are proactively coming to you saying, what can we do to improve? You have those early adopters who might have like quietly whispered in your ear or sent you a private message saying like, okay, I think I'm interested in this. People are coming to you and saying, this is great. How can we actually participate more?
Yeah, I love this. I think for the statisticians out there, this is not about causation. It's about correlation. You can still show I'm doing this. These other things are happening. And if you can get to the look, we actually see turnover moving. That's amazing. But it might be something more specific, right? It could be you have a program you've put out there and it is tying together, and we'll get into some really specific examples in a bit, but tying some things together that normally were handled separately across the business. Maybe it's improving your onboarding process. Well, guess what? You can actually do some satisfaction surveys. You can track progress in those scores and things like that. So there are ways to measure. You don't have to be at the level of proving that you are indeed improving retention, right? So I think that's a key thing to remember.
Very good point. Yeah, totally agree. All right, so now we think about kind of the latest stage. This is their nirvana stage. You're putting all the pieces together. So you've got your tools in place. You've got your tactics in place. I really think about this stage as really more of the optimization period. So you've been humming along for a while, hitting your stride, but now things have started to change. And let's be honest, this is always going to be a journey. This is never something that can be solved. I think about this almost like the game of golf. You can't beat it. It's something that you're always going to be working towards. And if the only constant is change, things that might have worked well in the past may be starting to not work quite as effectively. And you might notice even things across your tool stack, maybe there's a little bit of overlap. The suppliers that you work with or your partners, they're going to be introducing new features. Other ones that worked really well before may not be as effective ahead. So it's time to start thinking about, well, do we need to consolidate? And how can we be consistent across all of these systems in the business to ensure that unified theme? Just making sure that we're optimizing there. There's also going to be change in the business. We talked about turnover before as well. Even if we can reduce that by a couple of percentage points, which has huge impact on the bottom line, by the way, there are going to be people that are coming in that are new, that have never experienced anything like this. These are going to be leaders, they're going to be managers, they're even going to be new employees that need to be convinced that, hey, this is important. Here's the evidence of why it's important, and we need to make sure that you're part of this program. So this is the nirvana state, the optimization stage, and this is the constant tweaking and changing. Anything out there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of want to go on to our next slide because I feel like we've put out this okay, here's our take on this maturity model. And I'm super interested to hear what people think. So I'm going to pop us into our next section here. So we are interested to ask for your organization, or even if you're a consultant, for example, maybe think of one that you're working with, where are you at in the employee experience journey, in particular related to this model? And honestly, if you have other comments and want to pop that into the chat, we welcome that as well.
Please do, yes, because this is a tough one. There's a lot going on here, and it's probably not a surprise that most people are probably going to be in 1 and 2. Toby, I would say, because when we talked earlier about not moving the needle at scale on employee engagement scores, for example, and you talked about those pockets of success. Those pockets of success are largely populated by those organizations that are in stage 3 and 4. And this is not to shame people that are in stage 1 and 2. Everybody has to start somewhere, but that does mean that there's a significant upside to embracing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a lot of getting the hang of it. A couple just starting out. I got to putting the pieces together.
Rock on.
Yeah.
Okay.
It says, oh, interesting. Putting the pieces together. That's top level. Love that. Oh, another one. It's interesting. I even think about, every person could sort of think about applying this, even at Speak Up, right? We have, we're always, as I like to call it, drinking our own champagne. And so I would say we're even at Speak Up. I'm just going to put it out there. I would say we're at the hitting our stride. I think that putting it all the pieces together is almost like that, top level Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, again, always room to improve, but yeah, this is kind of a fun one. Great. Well, we got some good feedback here.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Let's dive into some of those tactics. I think Daren, you're going to help us.
Yeah. So if we think about this, and I know there was a lot with that maturity model, and Tobi, you did a great job explaining some of those trends that we see for this coming year and ahead. And this is where we tie it all together. So, if you think about where you are on that trend, it looks like most of you are kind of in that getting the hang of it, putting the pieces together. Some people are a little bit more beyond that. What we're going to talk through now is some very specific tools and tactics and tips that you can do that no matter where you are, you could probably start to employ some of these things. And just a disclaimer, we're going to talk some of the examples of what this could look like. I mean, you may be rocking it in certain areas and you might feel a little bit behind in others. So little context there, but this is where we try to unify everything and really give you something that you can take away and implement right away, no matter where you are in the model.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so I'm going to dive in with some scenarios here and just going to reinforce it again. This is like where you could be. So we're not pretending to know where you're at and saying for sure these are the exact pieces of this part of the model, but we need to bring it together with some practical examples. So let's say you are at that first level stage. You're really just starting to get it together. You're looking to centralize and get some unified approach across the organization. For sure, I can almost guarantee you could do a little bit more about understanding the voice of your employee, figuring out where their level of engagement is. So even if you have some kind of survey out there, which is probably a little bit uncommon at this stage of the maturity model, what you could do is start with a pulse survey. Something quick. It's not the full, like you need 10 to 15 minutes to complete and it's, tied to the Gallup, Q12 or anything. It can just be asking some pointed questions regularly over time. It could be once per month. And it's looking for that connection between what your leaders believe employees care about and what they actually care about. And I don't know how many times I've spoken to managers and leaders that told me they know what their frontline needs. We don't need to talk to them. And let me tell you, I've never seen anybody go forward and ask the question and not be surprised. There's always something that you didn't know. Granted, you need to get that in a way that's, probably anonymous, ideally that people can feel comfortable giving true feedback. And if you are so struggling to get to your frontline teams, and digital would be a hard way to do it, think about the old-fashioned paper suggestion box, right? Like you can always get feedback from people. If you can get in front of them, join, a daily stand-up, another great way to do it. So moving on, and I got to keep my eye on time because as Daren knows, I can really deep dive on these things. So employee journey. I don't want to be intimidating here and make you feel like you've got to go spend a week mapping out the journey of your employees. But if you're going to tackle employee experience, taking a couple hours to really think through what is the overall employee life cycle and then what's happening to those people at those times is very helpful here. So we know, there's pre-boarding. I'm thinking about joining your company. Onboarding, super sensitive and important time. Career growth after you've onboarded, and then offboarding, I'm leaving, and then even potentially an alumni experience. And just mapping out what parts of your organization are touching that employee and what tools do they have to use. It can be really eye-opening, and it's a great place to start. Communication. So you are likely struggling to reach directly to all employees. So at this stage, if you could just ensure you focus on your leaders of people and making sure there's consistency of messaging, that you're helping them by getting them the clear calls to action that they need to attend to, right? Because especially our people leaders have so much on their plate. They are managing those folks. They are making sure the work is getting done. They are reporting up, but then we're asking them to make sure comms get cascaded. And this is very common. So let's just try to do what we can to manage the noise they receive and also make sure what we do ask them to communicate is super clear with things like leader talking points.
Yep, love that. And Tobi, I was even thinking about your comments around the employee journey, and it can seem intimidating for folks. And we're talking about this in the context of just starting out. But this is really something that applies no matter where you are in the maturity model, doesn't it? Right? Because they change, and just understanding those touch points can be such a valuable bit of insight.
Yep, absolutely. So grain of salt, you might be all the way up in that higher stage, but if you haven't done the employee journey bit yet, worth it. So next stage, so you're starting to get the hang of it. You've got some consistency in certain areas. I would say, again, if you think about communication, this is a really good time to assess your communications channels. Understand, are people are we still doing a bulletin board? Is it digital or analog, literally paper? Are we indeed sending emails? Are we using tools like whatever, Teams, chat tools? And then what are the meetings? What are the regular meetings that happen? So what are all those ways that communications get cascaded? So understanding what they are, and ideally, are they working? Getting a little feedback and understanding that is a great thing to focus on. Onboarding. So we know that as when we talk about these things that impact our business and employee retention, employee engagement, if you can rocket through the onboarding experience and give an employee a really good experience, you have such a high chance of that investment of the time and training paying off by way of keeping those employees longer. So I always think of this one as a good area to focus. Onboarding checklists. So understanding throughout the different roles of your business, are there checklists? Are they specific to the role? At least a little bit. And do they at least give an idea what success in the role looks like? Don't just focus on forms that have to be filled out or processes that have to be followed. Give your employees a vision of what success looks like in their role. And Daren, I feel like this is like a ripe AI opportunity. What do you think?
It is. Yeah. Thank you for the setup. This is definitely a place where AI can be your friend. And, I was thinking about this, for those of you who are a little bit more comfortable with AI, or if you're just starting out there, thinking about this in the context of, whether it's onboarding or that employee journey mapping. And this is an amazing way that AI can actually help you tie a lot of this information together. So, like, let's take retention as an example. You might get AI to help you out by just exporting some reports from your HRIS that you can clean up, you can sanitize with a handful of columns. Maybe it's employee start date, employee end date, job code or job title. And again, you can sanitize that data, and maybe department or location or something. And if you upload that to, say, a ChatGPT or something, alongside your onboarding program, alongside your communications programs, maybe you have some exit interview data that you have, or any other information that can be relevant, you can just upload all of that information to an AI model, again, sanitized and compliant with your company's policies, and just ask it questions like, hey, I want you to help me spot some of the biggest risky elements in our employee's journey and help me come up with a plan of how to mitigate that. And as you get more comfortable in using the models and asking the right questions, you would be shocked on how quickly you can get these insights. So imagine you take that data and then say, hey, to your leaders, I've identified that the biggest risky point for our employees is between day 90 and day 120. And it turns out because that's when their onboarding has finished up and they're starting to do the regular management or meetings with their supervisor, and they're being held to the same standard as people who have been there for years. So I'm suggesting that we introduce a secondary training at this stage and that we change some of the questions that managers are asking. I'm throwing this stuff out, but these are the types of things that I think AI can help you be a bit more efficient on that. And so you come up with an actual plan, mastering your AI, that is going to finally get your seat at the table and is going to manage some of those turbulent times. So
love that example. That's so good. So good. All right, moving on here. So safety and well-being, I put this here not because for sure stage 2 is where you should address safety and well-being. Safety and well-being is really important for organizations. Well, frankly, every organization, but when it comes to our industries that work with frontline teams, safety is going to be key. And, when we think about safety, well-being 100% plays in, and we know that having well-being programs, making those investments are really important. So this is a nice time, if you don't have it already, to take stock of your safety information and processes and understand where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, where are there inconsistencies across the business, and what can you do? Another example where you could look at tying what you and HR comms do and looking at your business outcomes, and then helping assess, work with your safety folks. If you can access the team is responsible for well-being programs, looking at how do we make sure they're getting uptake? Are they being understood and heard and made available? So just some more examples. And I'm going to start speeding up a little bit because boy, time is flying. So we have our third stage. So hitting your stride. So recognition, this is something that we know is tied to higher employee engagement. When you feel recognized for your work, when you have a friend at work who can acknowledge the things you do, and when you have a good relationship with your leader. So understanding how recognition is happening at your organization is one thing to be done. It could just be that you have managers who are great at calling out team accomplishments or individuals who are doing well. But this is probably the time to think about what could you do from an established program perspective. Setting some criteria. I see a lot of across customers star awards or another one actually tying into that safety goal is recognizing stop work obligations. So having a program for that says when you do practice the stop work obligation, it is going to highlight the lesson learned. We're going to recognize you. These are things that can do things like help build a safety culture. Or a culture of safety within an organization. And so it can be tied together just to kind of show a little bit of that cross-functional nature here. Communication. So you have hopefully, nailed down your comms channels. Have you gotten to a point, and if you haven't, now's the time to make sure everybody in the organization knows what comms live in which channels and, where I'm going to get my information and who's going to be sharing it and what I'm allowed to communicate where and when. So just really bringing that all together and making sure it's crystal clear. And then from a learning and development perspective, again, this might be key to your company, and so you've actually already been doing it from stage one. But this is a great time to think about, for especially frontline employers, what can you do to help them see career pathways in your company? Even maybe outside your company, I dare to say, because the truth is, if we, as you have a frontline employee who could be making 50 cents more an hour at the place down the road, if they also, though, see that you're offering the ability to learn within your organization or see a path for growth to a new role, that is something that may well keep them. And so these are things to just understand, again, work with your L&D or your training teams, understand where people are at, what is the way to grow within your organization or within a profession. That's another key area we could focus on.
I love all this. And Tobi, you've talked about these as kind of three distinct focus areas, but they're really not, aren't they? I mean, they're really unified. If you think about, your comments around recognition and having those established programs, that flows into communication to make people aware of learning and development opportunities, which open up career pathways, which drives more recognition. I mean, it's almost a cyclical element, but what it really is a bowl of spaghetti. Everything's all kind of intertwined together, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I have a good. I was speaking with a customer yesterday. I would say they're in stage 3, if I had to guess, or place them. And I would say that they have a lot of recognition that goes on. Shouting out team members, team accomplishments, organizational wins. That they are at the point now where they're going to invest in a recognition program and tool that awards points, and people can get actual physical or monetary rewards for that. And what is so cool is we're working together to look at how to tie their behavior within their employee experience app. So I'm sharing content, I got people engaged, and tying that to the recognition tools so that they can actually, bring these things all together. And even if that is around the topic of safety, the topic of growth, like it can indeed, that's a great example. I think that illustrates what you're saying, DJ. It's like bring it all together. Perfect.
Well, we've been talking to these folks for a while, Tobi. What do you say we hear from them now?
I think that's a great idea. All right.
For those of us that have been here with us this whole time, we appreciate it. One last question for you. What is your biggest barrier to creating a unified employee experience? Let's hear this, get these votes in, see how people are doing. Limited resources. Heard that before, once or twice. Scattered tools and platforms, 100%. Lack of team alignment, interesting. Yeah, definitely. Limited resource. You know what I'm surprised about, Tobi, is that nobody's yet voted for unclear ROI on EX initiatives. Maybe there's some audience bias here. Maybe we've got the right audience who knows there's ROI, don't we?
Yeah, I think the other ones maybe also right in their face. Love the spread though here, kind of across all three.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're about wrapping up. What do you say we move on to the last couple of slides here?
Do it.
So, I think this is kind of the bring it all together, right? We've talked about this is the optimization stage. I mean, we talk about employee experience optimization in the context of kind of that maturity model, but this is really where you're really bringing things in. So you might have that simplified experience as in the context of a tool like a Speak app, shameless plug, excuse me, but this really is that simplified experience. And And we don't talk about this in the sense that this is a Lord of the Rings tool, like one tool to rule them all, but it is the place that lattices all of the other campaigns and tools together in a place, and then enables you to employ some consistency across your organization with a lot of these initiatives. And the idea that we want to have here is that if an employee needs something, if they aren't necessarily even going to seek it out, you're going to expose them to it within this platform. And they know that no matter what I need, I don't necessarily need to know the tool where it's going to be, but I know I can go here and I can be pointed in the right direction. And that's where your organizational goals manifest themselves into things like your policy, your processes, driving your productivity in a secure environment that you control. And I love the final point that we put in here about the tactics, which is unifying your metrics and outcomes. This is where that's that unifying thread across every single initiative that you had when you think about optimization, is what are the key business outcomes that we're looking to move the needle on? How are we going to get there? And how can we actually track to drive, if not causation, certainly a high degree of correlation within there? What do you think, Toby?
Yeah, I could go on with some examples, but I want to share one specific one because I think the metrics and outcomes tends to intimidate people a lot. And so I have a customer who is, we have a great analytics dashboard, but she's taking it to a next level. So she goes every month and she grabs key data points, and she has her own business dashboard. And she's a people lead within the organization. And she is taking that dashboard, breaking it down by location and business outcomes and goals that are shared, and showing them progress and showing them the impacts, and then giving them tips of what they can do. And it is the coolest example to me of just that bringing it all together. So that's the type of thing that, again, shameless plug at SpeakUp, we love to help our customers with. Like, how do you take this beyond just how do I use a tool, and into the strategy of how do we meet our business objectives? So
well, I think we're wrapping up now. So listen, folks, I was kind of talking about chapter 5. This is where we bring it all together here. And I think the idea that we've been trying to talk about here is that we're not going to be working in silos any longer. That cross-functional collaboration, really focus on driving that positive employee experience, does help us drive those positive business outcomes that we need to be successful. So thinking about putting those tools and processes in place, no matter where you are in that maturity model. I think most of us were kind of in that stage 2 or 3 sort of an element. We know it does improve significant things like your employee engagement scores. It's going to bring down those retention challenges you might be facing. It helps with recruitment, compliance, customer experience, revenue goals, communications. Everything really is going to be the focus. And I believe that 2025 is the year that we're turning the corner towards making some significant progress within these areas within your business, and everybody's going to be improving. So I think that focus on employee experience as a holistic discipline is where things are headed.
Absolutely. And, appreciate everybody hanging in with us. I think that this has been a lot of information. We've covered the key trends. We've talked about a new model, and then we try to give you some real specific examples of how you could apply it. I think the key that we want to get to here is to say, look, where are you at right now? Take a minute, try to assess that. Think about areas where you can bring specific value. I think that this is going to help you to indeed take steps forward for growth. So I love to hear questions. If you have any, you can pop them in the chat or the questions section. Either one would be fine.
Looks like we got somebody typing here. And if not, I know we usually like to keep this to a tight 45, but we got a little passionate, didn't we, Toby?
Yeah, no surprise.
I think we are done with the questions, but I just want to say a big thank you to you, Toby, for doing this with us. Thank you, David. Everybody on the call, thank you for participating, joining with us.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you for the compliment, David. I appreciate it. Coming all the way from London. Thanks for staying with us late in your evening.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daren. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Everybody have a lovely day. We'll be sending out the slides. And just as a small plug, if anybody has any questions or think that SpeakUp might be able to help you improve employee experience for your frontline workers, get in touch with us. You can go to speakup.com or connect with us on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon and day. Bye.
Bye.